morning. Can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear me now? Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Amy Breeze Harper, and I made it. Thank you. So, I've rewritten this talk a million times. I've come a long way in the way I've presented these difficult subjects. I started talking about 10 years ago about this, formally getting paid to do it. Was always nervous, was always scared, was always apologizing. And this year I'll be 40, and I've made the resolution to stop apologizing. And I've made a resolution to speak more from my heart and really understand the power of testimony and counter-storytelling. Over the years when I've given talks about whiteness, racism, I've gotten a lot of people in the audience, mostly white, enacting white fragility by literally interrupting me, telling me I don't know what I'm talking about. I know most of you, if you're in your field of doing ism work, you've been challenged. I am not going to deal with this morning. If you do it, I will compassionately tell you to be quiet and tell you that what you are doing is an action called white fragility, white narcissism, okay? So that's the rule. Do not interrupt me. At the end, during the Q&A, feel free to ask questions, but I'm going to tell you, I have spent my entire life doing this work. I went to top institutions, and I'm not being arrogant, but I have to have these tools. When I was younger, I was told, you're just being sensitive. So I went into Harvard, Dartmouth, UC, and I got the tools to explain using social science research to understand what's going on and articulate it back to the population who told me it's all in my head. So I'm asking people to understand that and respect that. So when you ask those questions, if you've never actually taken time to become literate around whiteness, around systemic racism, but you want to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, or maybe you're just imagining it, I don't have time for that, okay? So I'm saying that out of love and frustration, and a lot has happened in the last few months that's really shifted the way I want to talk about this. And I love you guys. It's unconditional love. But this is love. Love is not coddling. Love is not pandering to the emotional needs of the status quo. Okay? So I come from an engaged Buddhist perspective where we do compassion, but compassion does not mean you just let the status quo keep on doing what they're doing and you just say, oh, it's okay, I don't want to hurt your feelings. That's not love. So engaged Buddhism means you understand that we're all deluded and we don't even know it. A lot of it is unconscious. And you're actively going to take away that delusion. It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be, it's going to hurt. But we're not talking about hurt feelings because the consequences are far worse than hurt feelings. Okay? Okay. So we're going to talk about feelings, and we're going to talk about why I changed this talk. And let me just try to figure out how to navigate using a tablet and a PowerPoint at the same time. So these have buttons on them. Who wants to tell me what they do?
This one right here.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about white fragility. So this is nothing new, but a woman named Robin DiAngelo coined the term. Her paper has gone viral over the past few years, but I want to remind people that white fragility is something that people of color have been dealing with in different contexts, different names for centuries, okay? But Robin DiAngelo has gotten very famous around kind of coining it. So white fragility is a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves from white people. These moves include the outward display of emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and leaving the stress-inducing situation. These behaviors in turn function to reinstate white racial equilibrium. Racial stress results from an interruption to what is racially familiar. These interruptions can take a variety of forms and come from a range of sources. So that's a 20-page article condensed into a paragraph. Okay, so I think it's important to talk about my work. So what I do, I have a PhD in critical food studies, and I'm really trying to understand how systemic racism, how neoliberal whiteness impact what we think is the ethical foodscape, how we practice ethical consumption, veganism, vegetarianism, those types of ethical practices. And what I need to understand is, how does the collective experience of being subjected to racial violence, how does that literally impact and influence what I think is an ethical foodscape or should be? How does that impact not just my relationship to creating an ethical food system, but everybody's relationship to creating an ethical food system? So I want to share with you Lauryn Hill's music to really give you context of what's happening right now in the form of music, okay? Are people familiar with Lauryn Hill and Black Rage? Okay. So if someone can try to help me figure out how to make this, like, go to the internet, that would be great. Okay, thank you. And if not, we can kind of do something else. I thought it was hyperlink, but if you can, the middle, yeah. Sorry. If it doesn't work, I can sing. Okay, great. So I apologize for people who may be not able to hear. I couldn't find the lyrics, but if you email me at the end, I can email you the lyrics if you're unable to hear this, okay? And if you can make it full. And it's quiet for a bit.
Black race is founded on 2/3 a person, rapings and beatings and suffering that worsens. Black human packages tied up in strings. Black rage can come from all these kinds of things. Black rage is founded on blatant denial, squeezed economics, subsistence survival, deafening silence and social control. Black rage is founded on wounds in the soul. When the dogs bite, when the beatings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember all these kinds of things, and then I don't fear so bad.
You took my son away from me. You know how hard it was for me to get him to stay in school and graduate.
Black rage is founded, fed us self-hatred, lies and abuse, while we waited and waited. Spiritual treason, this grid and its cages. Black rage is founded on these kinds of things. Black rage is founded on training and training, threatening your freedom to stop you complaining, poisoning your water while they say it's raining. Are you mad for complaining, complaining? Old-time bureaucracy drugging the youth. Black rage is founded on blocking the truth. Murder and crime, compromise and distortion. Sacrifice, sacrifice, who makes this fortune? Greed falsely called progress, such human contortion. Black rage is founded on these kinds of things. When the dogs bite, when the beatings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember all these kinds of things, and then I don't fear so bad. Free and surprise, is it myth or illusion? Forcing you back into purpose confusion, like human trafficking or blood transfusion. Black rage is founded on these kinds of things. Victims of
white, and he have 2 eyes.
Which doll is the ugly doll? Why is that doll ugly?
Because he's black.
I think we've got to see that a riot is the language of the unheard.
So, I think it's time to cry because I haven't done it in 12 years as a professional. And I show this because I've been talking to my twin brother a lot. And I love him very much. This is the man that I shared a womb with for 9 months. And he's calling me so frequently about so much suffering that he goes through. I have 3 children. And black rage, it's not anger directed toward white people, it's rage of just wanting to be unconditionally loved. That's where the rage comes from. Thank you. So, as I show this video and I think about the whole history, the context, the now, how does that shape what I think should be ethical consumption, creating the ethical foodscape? Thanks, guys. So I'm going to give you a little more history. I've been doing this work a lot. In the past 3 or 4 months, there's been a great shift, and there are certain people who consider themselves experts in the field of animal rights, veganism, who've decided to attack people, women of color, who want to start at the point of black rage, want to start at that history to create our sense of what is ethical and moral in terms of food and beyond. The responses to me is a clear sign of white fragility, which I think is white narcissism. And when I'm talking to my brother on the phone, this beautiful, amazing black man who's living in Vermont, when I'm thinking about the history of my own family, where my great-grandfather left Jim Crow, Mississippi, did the Great Migration to the North, because during that time he had a gun all the time, not necessarily to defend himself against the KKK, but if it was too big, the mob was too big, he would rather use the gun on his family than have the KKK take his family and torture them and kill them. That's the reality. This is not like 400 years ago. This is like within the time that my parents were living. And the mere fact that like my great-grandfather, who died at 49 of a heart attack, but probably a broken heart from like such a horrible system, and my brother and I, my brother is still talking about this. Why am I worried about you? And yet we're trying to take care of each other. But the way I also think about healing systems and food systems, we're trying to get through this together. And we're talking. This is really stressful. What can we do? Well, be sure that you don't overdose on sugar. You know, let's think about this. Have you been taking this herbal supplement? Have you been taking this food? How can we eat in a way to survive through this struggle? Because historically, we know nutritionally, a lot of us have died young for many reasons, but the way things and resources are structured, we didn't have the food and nutritional systems we needed, because that's what happens when your people are colonized and things are taken away. So my brother and I were talking about all these different forms of just trying to survive and being seen as human. And a lot of our interactions really inform my work. And then I'm thinking about my father. I'm thinking about my children. And then I'm also thinking about, over the last few months, a certain human being who has a lot of pull, a lot of power within the animal rights movement, how he's responded to the work that I have been doing, Christopher Sebastian, how that negativity. And I began thinking about the way a lot of the Trump supporters are listening to Trump and saying things like, "Make America great again." And I think about many of the people who follow this particular person have contacted me with similar types of themes, saying that you must be a white-hating racist because you're engaged in this work. Or I'm contacted by people who literally are being taught that veganism as we know it is going to be blemished when we bring in these people of color's perspective. Let's make veganism great again by making sure these people of color don't put their agenda into what we're doing. Our agenda is wanting to be seen as human, and not in a specious way, but like Af said last night, most of us haven't even been given the right to be seen human yet because we're still seen as animals within the colonial context. So what I've been doing in this past few months is that I'm sick of being scared and coddling even to the needs of the mainstream who are not ready for this. I'm trying to create a future where there are possibilities of conditional love for everyone, and there's possibilities where those who keep on thinking that the real racists are Trump supporters, trying to make that shift and explain that, no, actually, you're right here in the room. And sorry, if you're a white racial, actually, I'm not apologizing. If you're a white racialized subject, whether you want to admit it or not, you're racist. It's just how it happens. I'm a cisgender woman. I never would go out and hurt anybody who is transgender woman or man, but that doesn't matter. Because my entire life, I framed justice through a cis-sexist lens because I live in a cis-sexist society. Does that make sense? The same thing happens when you're racialized as a white subject. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a Trump supporter. The mere fact that you don't have a white racial literacy around your own history and how it's informed today, that is violent and that is a problem. A lot of people tell me who are white don't know where to start. Google. If you don't understand how to find egg replacer for your vegan recipe, you Google it and you learn and you figure it out and you experiment, and by the time the year is over, you know how to make that brunch with an egg replacer because you researched it, you experimented, and you figured it out. Not same thing, but if you wanna, you can do the same thing to yourself, okay? I need to know my history because I know how it informs me. I know how it informs my work. Know your history, and I'm not talking about the sanitized K through 12 stuff. Know your history. Know how it impacts what you're doing now. Know the history that got you where you are in terms of how resources, land was allocated to the collectivity of white people here, and how it shaped your relationship to what you think is ethical. How it shaped how you've even responded to when you're asked to talk about race. Ask yourself how many times that you've just been a bystander and have said nothing or done nothing when you know that something that is happening is racist or white supremacist. Ask yourself why you did nothing and why you think it had little impact. People have to understand, people like Hitler rose to power not because of people like kill the Jews outright. It's people who were bystanders, sat there and did nothing. And that's what you have to understand. It's the small things you do that are the big things. If someone says something, does something, use your power and quell it, squash it now, okay? Because I think about things like Dylan Roof, people who are like, well, we kind of knew he had racist paraphernalia. As soon as you see someone who has that, do something, okay? I'm serious, do something. You have the power and privilege to do something. You have to do something. If you don't know what the signs are, teach yourself. Pick up the plethora of literature that is written about gaining white racial literacy. Google it. It gives you steps to really understand the red flags, the signs for unconscious or conscious racist white supremacist behavior. This is very important, okay? I'm very serious about this, and I'm very angry because now is not the time to think maybe I should or should not do it. I'm emotionally comfortable, like the consequences are real, okay? My brother in Vermont right now, those consequences are real. When he tells me where he lives in all-white Vermont city, in an apartment, and he goes to take the dog for a walk, and the same white woman who's lived there forever, just like he has for 6 months, is scared when the elevator opens, and she's like, and he's like, yeah, I'm just the same black guy who's lived here for 6 months. Say something to someone when you see something like that. Explain to them the history of white women overreacting to a black man in their presence and how they've been lynched from the from the past to now. Does that make sense? You have to say something, okay? And I'm putting that responsibility on you because of the impact. It's so negative. When you are in these spaces, do something. Okay? This is very important. I have friends in the Bay Area who are white allies, and they're beginning to stay and witness when a police officer is talking to a young black man in a largely white neighborhood. They're there, they're saying, at least they're doing something. They understand that something could happen. Most likely something won't, but to be there and witness and do something. Okay? This is very important. Yes, it is. So I'm gonna talk about kind of how I got here with different examples of what it means to engage in intersectional anti-racism, okay? And how to uproot white fragility. So first of all, one of the main strategies of white fragility is to enact emotions and say your feelings have been hurt. It's too hard for me to talk about race. No, okay? If the worst thing to you is hurt feelings, then you're really privileged. Okay, move beyond that, work through it. It's normal. You're gonna have hurt feelings. When you've been told your entire life you're a good white person because you're not a KKK member and someone calls you out, yeah, it's not gonna feel good, but it's not supposed to feel good. Work through it. It's fine, but work through it. Don't make it center, okay? When you come together in a center, in a circle, in a community, and you're talking about this, you want actions. If you're a white identified person, don't take up space and make it about your feelings. That's the number one way to shut down any action moving forward, okay? Use the space some other way, but do not make it about your feelings. Okay? Okay. So number two is, when you actually see and witness that something is, or experiencing that something is not happening, and you know consciously if you fight against it, you'll lose your power and privilege, I'm sorry, you need to fight against it. And there are people who say, yeah, well, I knew that we should have done this, but I'm really worried about being demoted, or I'm very worried about me not being promoted. No, that is not the goal. The goal is for everybody in the society to benefit systemically from your single action of actually saying, no, this is wrong, this is immoral, I'm not gonna go for it. So I know there are certain people who, if you're in a position, you really need a job and you'll be homeless next week, you will have no food. I'm talking about people who you can actually give up that power and privilege because you're still gonna be okay materially, okay? So you need to say something. Don't just sit there and not say anything or do anything. Number three is, a lot of times people of color just need their own spaces to come together and talk. Don't go and say, well, I want to be part of it. I don't understand, this is racist. That is not awesome, that is not an ally. Okay, that's white fragility. People of color, we need our own spaces. And I'm gonna tell you, like, once again, I would never go into a space where transgender people need to talk about systemic violence and get them and say, well, I'm a cisgender ally, it's not fair, I wouldn't do that, that is inappropriate. That is not being an ally. Okay, it's not about your feelings being hurt again or being excluded. People who have been marginalized, who have been subjected to, over and over again violence against them, they need safe spaces. It's very important. And I say this because a few years ago, I attended an event specifically for African American women who wanted to heal using Buddhism at Spirit Rock, and guess who got upset? White people. It was the most beautiful space I'd ever been in because I had been part of the engaged Buddhist community for a very long time. I moved to San Francisco, where the San Francisco Zen community, white, wealthy, they just don't get how the racial embodied experience literally creates a different sense of being, which would create a different sense or way of how you practice Buddhism. Okay? For them, you let go of the ego because race and gender is just material and it's the ego. And you can go above that by just letting go. But letting go and forgetting that really is a white class privilege. Okay? So we had this beautiful space, 80 women of African descent together, healing. We didn't have to start talking about let's define racism, does white supremacy exist? We're all on the same page. We're in this space. It's beautiful, it was empowering, and it just revitalized my activism. White fragility, white narcissism happens when the only black ordained Zen Buddhist priest is contacted by white people telling her that she had no business doing that it is racist. That is white fragility. That is not being an ally. So don't do things like that. If you don't feel like you're included, welcome to the club of being a racial minority. That's what it feels like. And sit with it, but do something. So what I want to also talk about is, what does this look like within vegan practice, animal rights? And sometimes some of us don't even notice it, that it's happening, if you're a white identified human being collectively. Most people of color, you have to understand the signs because you have to survive. So if you don't know those signs and signals of racism, then you're not going to survive. To be racialized as white means you're not supposed to notice it consciously. You're supposed to ignore it. You're supposed to be post-racial. We've been there, done that. So some of the examples I can use in my own practice and my own just kind of developing vegan practice and these experiences. I began the Sister Vegan Project, which is what I'm most or best known for, 10 years ago. So I did a call for papers for Sister Vegan to figure out what does veganism look like through the embodied experience of black women. So I did a call for papers on the internet and it went, well, this is 10 years ago, so there wasn't much going on, but I ended up on a site called Vegan Porn, which had nothing to do with porn, but everything vegan. And it was the responses, 80 pages of white responses toward what does veganism have to do with race and gender. And it was literally a display of all these white identified vegans who had never considered themselves racist, being violent. But they either are just delusional, which they are, or they're just kidding themselves that they're not racist, because they were saying things like, if you speak like you were born to a crack addicted mother, sister versus sister, then you don't deserve to have a job. Or I wrote a master's thesis on it. So the point is, the way I responded to that, to uproot that white fragility, was I didn't even bother trying to interact. I analyzed it. I wrote a master's thesis at Harvard, and I got the Dean's Award for it. Because that's how I used it. That's how I uprooted it. And to really show, this is how covert whiteness operates, even amongst those who don't consider themselves racist and literally would die for the welfare of non-human animals. This is what it looks like. You do not have to be, once again, a KKK member. Discursive violence creates physical violence. That's what was going on this entire online community. And what was interesting, the way they were all talking, it was as if non-white people would ever go online to look at what they were talking about. So it was like cyberspace as white space. Not just, there's this saying that public space is white space, but since the transition, a lot of us making communities on cyberspace, and this was back 10, 12 years ago, that cyberspace was still that assumed space of whiteness. So they were just comfortably talking about black people and why is race so important, playing the race card, why do people talk black English? And there was one snippet where these people were trying to speak black English, and just, it didn't make any sense, like, I'm gonna bomb up the speakers or something like that. And then I wrote how, well, actually, Black English and Ebonics have a real grammatical system. It's a real system. It's a real language. But it was the way they displayed their whiteness, it was cyber minstrelsy, so there's the minstrel shows, but it was just the way there were these white people that were trying to speak Black English, and it was just such a display of violence, and I thought, this is the mainstream vegan movement, and these are people who literally think they're good people, but like the road to hell can be paved with good intentions, good people, and that's what people don't understand. It doesn't matter what your intention is. What is the impact? Okay? So it doesn't matter if you didn't know. Google it. It's not about intent, but I didn't mean to, but it doesn't matter. When I first created the Sister Vegan Project, I didn't mean to exclude people who were not cisgender women. It doesn't matter. The impact was negative. And I owned it. And I took action. I didn't start making excuses. I didn't become fragile. I learned, and I shut up, and I listened. I didn't deny the experiences of gender nonconforming people, transgender identified people. I didn't do that. I listened because it didn't matter that that was not my intent, because the impact was negative. And people from communities that did not consider themselves cisgender women and men, they told me what the negative impact was. And I responded, and I did something. And yeah, I'll always be cissexist because as a cisgender woman, I'm in that system. So I'm always gonna have those privileges, I'm always gonna benefit from it. But I'm still constantly not, you're gonna screw up, okay? I'm constantly screwing up, trying to be an ally. You're human, you're gonna screw up. Make your screw ups and your challenges opportunities to transform and become better allies. Like this SHIT took 500 years to create. You're not going to figure it out in one workshop and probably not in one lifetime, okay? And that's what you have to understand. We're this quick fix society, okay? But it didn't happen. I took a workshop and I still screwed up. Well, yeah. So it's a continuum. I have to remind myself of that. You have to decolonize your brain, even the ways you think you're supposed to do activism. A lot of us are still very colonized about it. And that's like most people, regardless of how you've been racialized, most of us, if you were born and raised in a neo-colonialistic colonized society, your thoughts are compartmentalized. You're thinking in a one-dimensional way. It's designed that way. It's designed that way. It's strategically designed that way. Okay? But you're also taught that as an individual, you need to look up to some guru, some huge leader to make change. No, you are the change. So you have to understand that you have power and you have agency, and you're gonna screw up. But you have to do it now. You have to not just educate yourselves, because most people are educated in society to know that racism, sexism, classism, all that is bad, but they do it anyway. So you have to move beyond education. You have to move beyond intellectualizing it, and that's why I'm like the feelings part, I'm talking more, how do you just feel in your heart, combine it with your praxis, combine it with the critical theory, what does that look like? I don't know. I'm on a continuum. So what I'm asking people to do is, whether you're in the ethical consumption movement, it doesn't matter where you are, is that you have to do this action, okay? And lots of people of color, not every person of color is anti-racist, but collectively, most of us get it. And I'm calling white people out, okay? Don't do the white fragile thing. Don't do it. It's not helping anyone. It's hurting all of us. It's hurting you. It's hurting your potential. Okay? So I kind of wanted to go back to my PowerPoint that I forgot about. Because I'm a stream of consciousness talker. And I have all these annoying definitions of race and racism, but I'm like, just Google it. Google me, Gmail me, and I will send you the list of all of these terms, whether it helps or not. It's too much. My book, yay. And this is my brother. I want to. This is the real person in my life. This is my brother Talmaj. He's 3 minutes older than me. And yeah, I was going to tell the history of my parents and their families. I thought it would be helpful very quickly, but this is us, and our history is that we're here. And yes, we have a lot of privileges. We do grow up more privileged than my grandparents, but at the same time, we're still here. And this is one of my best friends in the world, and I see him as this spirit having a human experience. That's all he wants to be seen as. And lastly, the way that I kind of uprooted white fragility and engaged in kind of this intersectional anti-racism. Actually, I have more time than I realized. Last year, I decided, in response to the many white people who didn't understand what race had to do with veganism, again, for the 400 millionth time, I put together the Vegan Praxis of Black Lives Matter web conference, which happened about a year ago, but you can actually download everything. And I had the most amazing people come and just speak and talk about, what does that look like? If we understand the central tenets of Black Lives Matter and it as, the continuation of Black liberation and anti-racism, what would vegan praxis actually look like if Black Lives Matter were central? And it was amazing. There were 200 spaces available and 183 people showed up, which was, for me, quite telling because I didn't know what to expect. So these were some of the questions I asked, and these are just kind of, what can I do? I just decided, no one's doing it, so I'm going to do it. That's what you do. So one of the questions we asked is, what does ethical consumption look like in an era of Ferguson? Can it be a continuum of the Black Lives Matter movement and resist neoliberal whiteness and systemic racism? And actually it can. What would it look like if we made visible to mainstream vegan USA that the murders of Trayvon Martin, Arnisha McBride, Michael Brown, Oscar Grant, and Eric Garner, to name a few, are the collateral damages of neoliberal whiteness? So those were the questions we asked, and if you want to know, you can actually go here and download the conference proceedings. It's 2 days long, and there's PowerPoint presentations. I apologize for people who are visually not able to see, but I'm still working on getting everything transcribed. So that's available. And this is what I highly recommend if you would like some resource about how to uproot white fragility and be a true Black ally. Sorry, a white ally. I highly recommend this because people use real life examples. The keynote is Liz Ross, and she talks about the new Jim Crow, and she talks about the era of mass incarceration. We've got a woman, Nin, who talks about the prison industrial system as well, but the mere fact that mostly Black and brown bodies are enslaved, and they're enslaved to create commodities, including agricultural commodities. So how the PIC cannot exist if these capitalist corporations are not in existence, trying to use these Black bodies and these brown bodies as new forms of labor and slaves. So when people tell me, what is the prison industrial complex, half white people tell me, have to do with veganism, well, that's what it has to do. Because a lot of these products that are made that are vegan are made through people who are incarcerated. So we talk about that. And we also talk about, okay, I'm going to go through all this because I have, we talk about, okay, 1 second. And we talk about, voting with your dollars. Voting with your dollars. If you understand the history of voting, just ignore that. When your voting rights are taken away, after you've gone to jail, you can't vote as a political, in the political system, you cannot vote. But when you're incarcerated and you're out of jail, it's hard to find a job. So you can't vote with money because you didn't get a job to get money to vote to change the food system. So it's things like that where we talk about that during the conference. So voting with your dollars, the mere fact that you should have more rights because you have money, and the oblivion around the whole history of what it means to racially profile, incarcerate brown and black people when you get out as a convicted criminal, that you lose your right to vote. It's hard to find a job. Like, you're losing that power. So we talk about things like that, because those memes are really popular, like, vote with your dollar to change the system. Like, voting is a racial class privilege, people. So why don't we talk about that first? So those are the things that we talk about. And this conference was a way to kind of uproot white fragility and become true intersectional anti-racist activists. So I don't even know what it's there. And these are some of the things. Can I touch your hair is like saying, look, Mom, I'm Negro. Somehow that picture is in there, and I don't even know why. So I don't even know, because I don't know how to use Keynote or PowerPoint. But I wrote that because people are always asking, can I touch your hair? But one of the things I wanted to say was, I had been giving a talk, let's say 4 years ago in Texas, and I shared a ride with a woman, white identified woman who, I won't say, like, give too much, but she used to lead a huge organization that provides food for people mostly in Africa. And it was interesting because we were in the car together, and she didn't really know how to interact with me. And the first thing she says is, wow, you sisters sure have some great hair. Whoa, like, no? Did you just say that? Yeah, like, you sisters have some great hair. Like, wow, oh my God, you just said that. And you go to Africa all the time to work with people who look like me? So that was uncomfortable. So that's why I kind of put that in there. But it's just like moments like that where I'm thinking, wow, why did you not talk to me as if I'm a human being? Like, where did that come from? Why are you uncomfortable? And that's the first thing that you have to say. So that was one of the pictures I had kind of talked about and written about. It's kind of out of context because I don't know how to put things together. So, so here's my book. I'm working on a new book. So all this stuff that I'm talking about, it's going to be in a book. And what I want to do is, all this frustration and all this pain, how do I use this food, nutrition, how do I use it as a way, as an ally to our struggle? So I'm going to talk about, in memoir form, critical narrative form, just the things I'm talking about you now. And then at the end, I'll say, after I got news about Trayvon Martin and how I was like shaking because my son was like a baby at the time and thinking about his future, and I couldn't sleep, and I'm just like so scared. And then what did I do? And I made lemon balm tea, and I really tried to think about ways to nourish myself physically. So I'm going to talk about those recipes for racial tension headaches. So it'll be at the end of each chapter where I'll have this critical narrative about my adventures. It's called A Critical Race Feminist Journey Through the Post-Racial USA's Ethical Foodscape. Post-racial is in quotations. So it's going to be like recalling the last 10 or 12 years of this work that I'm doing, but also talking about the physical and the psychic toll it's taken on me. And I will acknowledge that everybody has nutritional and food access. We get that, so I'm going to talk about that. But also like how these recipes and all these ingredients can help with that pain. And my sisters and I, we were talking about just like those of us who, actually not necessarily sisters, but people who have wombs and boobs, because not everyone who has wombs and boobs identify as a woman. We talked about just times of stress where we're doing activism and we're bleeding really heavy, we have really bad cramps, and I talk to them and I say, okay, we have to start drinking Nettles tea. And we have to start doing the greens. So, we can't do this work if we're incapacitated because we're in so much pain. So just really talking about everything holistically. So I'm going to talk about things like that, get those recipes in there where when I'm really stressed out, I was eating all this chocolate and all this sugar, and I didn't realize, because my brain had still been colonized, I didn't realize that was causing me to bleed more, it was causing me to have pain and fibroids. It's things like that. So if you're not being taught how to take care of yourself nutritionally during stressful times as an activist, whether you're an anti-racist activist or any type of activist, and we're not making those connections, or we don't have a community to help us, we often might just be hurting ourselves and not know it. So I talk about like how to make sure you're taking care of your womb health, and then how to get access to those things if you don't have them because of transportation or finance, building community around that. And lastly, talking about, I nurse on demand. I would travel with my babies while giving talks. So talking about how to support nursing on demand as a form of food justice. Some of the comments people had made as me as a Black woman, nursing on demand, comments about me having too many babies, how I work in those spaces as a professional, and how to take care of myself through those stresses, because when you're trying to nurse, a lot of times stress can make you not make breast milk. So just things about that and how it begins to affect my own child. And really working through that, understanding herbs and food to help lactate holistically healthy way, but also how I create healthier spaces while I'm traveling throughout the country, where I'll always bring my babies with me while nursing, and particular people not being comfortable with that situation, and how I work through that, and how, yeah, so that's kind of what the book is going to be about. It's going to be about 12 chapters long. And so if you have questions, you can email me. Sorry if it's difficult to see. I thought it'd be big. It's always hard when I put things on the screen and then I wonder how big it's going to be. But it's sistavegan, like the book, @gmail.com. And I can email you the digital tool pack that I have to start doing more intersectional anti-racism and uprooting fragility, just the basic terms and definitions, like the difference between a non-racist and an anti-racist, the difference between systemic racism and institutional racism. So you can have that list of words and concepts to really understand. And I can give you information about the conference and just anything that you heard during this talk, just email me and I can give you more information, okay? So looks like we have about 10 minutes if you would like to if you would like to participate in the Q&A. Is there a Q&A? Oh, I didn't get to sing. I'm sorry. I always sing. I have to sing. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I need to sing. I usually sing at the beginning. But this is just the same thing. My husband's like, why don't you change your repertoire? But I'm going to do it. As many of you probably heard this before, but singing is it just heals my soul. So, okay. I'm gonna sneeze. Okay. How do I use it? Okay. We will not bow down to racism. We will not bow down to. I want to try that again. We will not bow down to racism. We will not bow down to injustice. Oh, we will not bow down to exploitation. I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand. We are the ones. We are the ones. We've been awaiting. We are the ones. We are the ones. We've been awaiting. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones, we are the ones we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones we've been waiting. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones. Thank you. Thank you. And I want to seriously thank the community Af, Christopher, Patrice, Lauren, Mark. Sorry if I'm forgetting people. That's all that we've been talking for like so long, and I get to meet everyone in person. Some of you I've already met, but like this is so powerful for me. And I felt alone for so long, and there's just this power of all of us getting together online and talking for so long. So I just want to remind people who are trying to do this work, if you feel alone, like there's a community out there, you just have to build it, and you have to give yourself like, yes, I'm going to go out and build that community. So Af and Patrice and Lauren, Mark, Christopher, Sebastian, just they've been this community. And I don't know, you guys are awesome. And yeah, so I just wanted to thank you. Like it's not like I did this on my own. Like we have been doing this together, and you guys have inspired me so much. And Af, when I saw you last night, I was like, oh my God, like my baby's grown up. I know, but it was just like, that's why I was like, wow. Like it was just, I don't know, like when you told me how my work influenced you. And sometimes I forget because I'm so focused on the negative and people's threats and stuff that I forget, like, oh yeah, Af and Christopher, that's why I exist. So thank you.
Just to another one of those rounds of applause, please.
Pax, yes, Pax.
I tried to point at Pax so that you.
I'm forgetting with names and Pax, yes. Yeah, but Pax too. Yeah, Pax was part of the community as well. So thank you. No, but it's important. Like you have to.
I was angling for Pax's inclusion.
No, thank you. I'm forgetting people. But Pax.
I wanted to, like, before we start the Q&A, like, just first of all, one of the advantages of being one of the organizers of the conference is that you get to hold the floor and use the microphone to say what you want. So I'm gonna exercise that right now. Thank you for coming out, because you have been doing this for 10, 12 years, and that was around about the time that I only had just started going on my vegan journey. And so there was no community for me there, and I didn't know that such work existed. And because of what you did, you paved the way for people like myself and for Af to stand on your shoulders and do the work that we do. So we all really contribute to each other. And so I want to thank you for that. And also I want to say that I feel like, I think at this point, I watched all of your videos that have been available online because I'm a fangirl. But I feel like in so many of your videos and in all of the other appearances that you've done, I saw Dr. Amy Breeze Harper, and I feel like today you brought Sister Vegan. And that is so important to me, and I think it's important to everyone in this room. And as uplifted as I am about that, I'm also angry, because what we're seeing, the reason why I feel like it took so long for us to see Sister Vegan coming out is because a lot of us, if we remember the rights, our Bill of Rights from yesterday, you weren't here for that, but right number one was you have the right to say fuck respectability. And for the longest time, I feel like we're looking at a woman who has actually been subjected to the system whereby she's had to actually play by the rules established by a very elitist and a very white, male-dominated field of academia in order to make your message palatable enough to be heard by these people that were really having no parts of it. And you have exercised your right to say fuck that respectability today, and I want you to do that all the time. Because we've really been robbed. I want us to acknowledge that fact that as much of the valuable work that you've done, there's so much more that could have been done. And there's still so much more to do. That's the beautiful thing about it. And and I'm just gonna say one more thing, before we start the Q&A. We've kind of been talking around this issue of the extremely vicious and abusive racial attacks that have been going on in the mainstream community, and and not really acknowledging that. But because I don't give any shits anymore, and because I have run completely slap out of fucks. I will just name it, and wherever the camera is, I'll just talk directly to the camera. Gary Francione, you're a complete piece of shit. I hope that you actually take some time to, when you watch this video, because you will watch it, because you live and exist within the lens and the framework of white narcissism as you were describing, You actually listen for a change to what's being said instead of trying to pick it apart, because I feel like, and I'm sure that there are other people who will agree, if a significant portion of your work is actually taking apart and dissecting everyone else, you're not an activist, you're a critic. And that's not helpful to anybody's movement, an anti-racist movement, a vegan movement, or otherwise. So really, really pay attention to that and check yourself. And I can't say anything more about that that hasn't already been said. But if you have questions, and I'm sure you do, raise your hand. We'll pass the microphone around. We'll start with Pax because you're so close.
Thank you. Wow, I can't top that, man. Comment/question. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Breeze, for being a really great ally to the trans community. I was hoping to talk about that in my presentation, but I'm not going to have time, so I want to do it here because I've seen like horribly oppressive stuff said in your forum on Facebook against trans people, and you've consistently stood up for us. So I want to, and also for trans women as well. So thank you very much for that. My question is, you had mentioned in your talk that people should Google to learn about this, and I understand that because as marginalized people, it's exhausting being educators all the time, and these resources are available. But the problem I have with that as a trans person is if someone just Googles about trans people, they're going to get a lot of like wrong stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
So I prefer to, have curated lists of resources, but I mean, there isn't full agreement in the trans community, especially within, non-binary people about all these, even the terminology. So it's very challenging to, know what to point to. So I guess the question is, how can you present, a curated, appropriate list of resources for people who want to educate themselves about Black Lives Matter without just getting the, so-called whitewashed version of it.
Okay, Google, that's good. Then, yes, Google it is not, it's too abstract. Okay, so I'm sorry about that. That was me assuming a lot. So when you Google stuff, you're gonna get lots of information, that's true, and it's gonna be conflicting. But if maybe curated, that's good, to Google like curated list of introduction to transgender theory, critical, Google curated list of Black Lives Matter. So that could be a start, but you're right, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's real and it's factual, so that's true. My apologies, but thank you for saying that, because that's something. So I don't actually have a straightforward answer on that, but if you can somehow find access to a curated list of topics related to these isms you're interested in, that's a great start. And then you can also email me, because I know I get lots of emails, people asking, I don't know where to start. And Google is huge when you do that. So you can actually email me and I can send you, at least start you off on the right track. So thank you, Pax. So I'll just take that. You can just email me and say, I don't know what you're talking about in terms of X, Y, or Z. I Googled it, I have all this information, I'm conflicted. Can you just start me off on, this list of curated stuff, and then I can send it to you, okay? So thank you. Thanks, Pax.
Did I see a hand raised on the other side of the room?
Oh, okay.
I had one response to like curating a list of resources for either like marginalized or historically looted folks, and I know that Tumblr is really great. It is like at least for a lot of millennials. If you search like master lists for like white privilege or a master list for, Decolonizing, yeah. So searching like master list for a certain topic often really comes up with a lot of folks. There's a lot of people on Tumblr, specifically Black Tumblr and Black Twitter. You can also search hashtags like Black history they didn't teach you in school. They have like history and like posts, and they'll like basically retell history through memes, which is really, really great. Like, and it can add like a really like almost comedic and healing thing for folks, for especially POC, but Black folks too, which is really, really a great resource I found. So.
Okay, thank you. See, that's the thing, intergenerational help, because I'm old. Like my kids are like, I was saying to someone, they don't even, I told them to hang up the phone. They're like, they don't understand. They're looking at the cell phone. They don't understand that. So, and yeah, so I'm like, okay, I'm 40. I didn't know 40 was old. So, but like different generations can learn. So like younger people who are in certain privileged locations that have access to technology, like I don't know those things. So I didn't even think about like the information that's been curated through hashtagging. So thank you. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Keith in the back of the room, meeting me halfway to get the microphone.
Oh, Keith is another part of the community I have to give shout out to. Sorry, I didn't have a list of all the people I wanted to.
Don't worry about me.
But Keith Tucker as well. He's been part of this community I'm talking about. So.
And I just want to say, too, that this is the first time I've seen so many black folks together doing this work. This is like historical, if you guys just really think about this, that all of these great people are here giving this information out. So I just want to commemorate it with getting a picture before we leave of these people that are doing this work. And I don't want to have to chase you around after the meeting, so I'm saying it now. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Keith.
Zarna.
Again, I'd like to express deep appreciation for the work that you've done. And also, I'm wondering if it's maybe possible for you to put a list of resources on the website, so that when people go to the website, they can just find that curated list and know that these are, good sources for these things.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I need to do that. I have a little
Anyone
toolkit
else?
I need to put together.
Corvus.
So my question is, I don't know if this can be answered. Sometimes I see a lot of white vegans when they're talking about veganism, and if like a person of color questions that, they'll like tokenize like a black vegan's voice and be like, you should go look at this. So like, how can white vegans uplift and signal boost voices of color without that tokenization? Like, I don't know if you can answer that.
Oh, yeah, sure. It's simple. Educate yourself on how to communicate in a way that is not missionary approach. So there's ways to there's decolonial approaches to communication, and Google it. I'll say that. But there's a way to understand tokenizing, and versus being an ally. So I'll do that. Someone needs to email. People email me what I need to curate. Okay, but that's another good question, because a lot of people don't know that. Who are white identified people really don't understand how to be an ally when they communicate or they use certain examples. A lot of white people love using Martin Luther King little snippets like Af was talking about, like he was not violent and this is what he wanted and he said color didn't matter. And but that's a tokenizing Martin Luther King and then asking black people to be this romanticized white narrative of Martin Luther King. So I think you need to have a literacy around how to not do that. So once you have a literacy and you can decolonize how you even relate to people who don't look like you through a non-missionary, non-colonizing approach, then it's probably, that would be my answer. But first you have to first be aware that that's what you're doing every time you say, well, look at that black person and how they're doing it. Like that's the root is that to be racialized as white means you're also communicating a certain way, and it's usually based in a colonistic missionary approach. Does that make sense? So you have to, what I suggest is first understand how that's impacted communication style and what you think is being an ally. Okay, thanks. I think someone on here.
So I feel like that I recognize that I have, through both how I was born, how I was raised, and what I do for a living, unique access to power structures. Mm-hmm. And what I don't know how to do is how to be the ally who offers my resources without feeling like I'm steamrolling, for lack of a better term. And it would be really helpful to know how I can say, this is what I can do and use me. I guess that's just it. And do you have any advice for how you can sort of offer that up without, I don't want to be arrogant, presumptive, any of these, any of these types of problems, but I do want to help, and I don't know how to reach out and help.
Okay, so I'd ask you, have you found a community of white anti-racist leaders? Or have you done any type of work where you get together and talk about these things?
Yeah, I live in the Bay Area.
Okay,
so
I was going to ask.
Pretty lucky.
Like in the Bay
Area.
Okay. I honestly, I have to. So I'm not white. So that was obvious, but So it's hard for me to know, because like I don't have the white racialized embodied experience to answer that question. I'm going to be honest. You might want to ask people who are really good at that as white allies. You know Chris Crass?
Okay.
You might want to connect with him. Are you familiar with his work?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if you have connected, but I feel like that's the first person that comes to mind. And his, he had a new book that came out about how white people can be anti-racist allies. So his name is Chris Crass. He's vegan. Really, what I've heard from white people who have engaged with him, he's a really good source for that. So I don't have the answer. I'm not going to make it up, but contact Chris Crass and use his work. And I think that might put you in the right direction or the right community to start. And remember, you're gonna screw up. Like, you're gonna screw up. It's okay. Yeah. So even when you can try things over and over again, you're still gonna screw up. Everyone screws up. So like that's why that person still may not have like the formula for you to never screw it up. I'm okay with okay, as long as you're cool with that. Feeling like I'm doing what I should be doing. But I would connect with Chris Crass and the community that he's made. Yeah, CHRASS. And he has a book called Collective Liberation, I think, that just came out 1 or 2 years ago, which a lot of white anti-racist allies say it's really, really good for that, like answering all those questions. Then he has a second book, and I forgot what the title is, but if you just Google Chris Crass books, then that will come up. And I think you can download the PDF for free, and it's like how to become an anti-racist activist for Black Lives Matter, white anti-racist, something like that. So those 2 books in that community, I think that would probably put you in the right direction. Okay.
You know, Dr. Harper, just as a side note, I wanted to like put out there that the video that you were showing earlier, Lauryn Hill's song, like, you know, I stepped out during that because it was actually a really emotional time for me.
That's why I was crying. I was crying to you.
But, you know, I just want to, like, you know, just as an aside, put out there that I acknowledged Lauryn Hill. And one of the rights that we talked about at the very beginning of this conference was the right to hold space for our allies, even though they may not be as woke as we are. Lauryn Hill, like, you know, she's made some notoriously homophobic and transphobic comments in the past.
That's good to know.
But we can still recognize that even though she's not there, she still has the capacity to create, you know, really meaningful anti-racist music and messages. And in like the intersectional justice community, like sometimes we get really wrapped up in everybody needing to do everything perfect.
Yeah.
And that's obviously like, you know, that's a place where like she falls down. But I'm still here for her music. I was here for that powerful song. And, you know, and that's something that, you know, that I want to make sure that we're all present to, that like sometimes people that we look up to are not going to be, you know, they're not going to be perfect. It's really difficult because you said something about looking for gurus, looking for leaders, you know, picking apart, you know, the parts of people's activism and the parts of people's messages that work for us. And, you know, and it's really difficult to navigate because sometimes there are really useful messages that I want to put out there, but I'm like, ooh, this person's terribly problematic. And I don't want to do so. And that's something that, you know, that you almost end up taking on like a case-by-case basis, because you can't just make a decision across the board like, you know, this person's garbage, but this person's wonderful. So yeah, I want to put that out there.
Thank you.
And keep on with the questions.
We have time for one more question.
One more. You got it and you were lucky.
Thank you. I wanted to say I really appreciated your comments and add maybe a couple of other suggestions based on the questions that have been asked. There is, in fact, in Seattle, for those of you from the Seattle area, something called the Coalition of Anti-Racist Whites. I think it's a good space that, you know, I've heard is a powerful place for, you know, whites doing this work. One of the things I've experienced a lot of is that it just seems like it's paralyzing to people that they think they're going to do the wrong thing. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to just get off, you know, start somewhere, get off somewhere and start talking about the issues, and also putting yourself in spaces where you are not the majority, right? Spaces that are uncomfortable for you. I saw a lot of white activists coming to Black Lives Matter events early on, and I've seen a lot of fall off of that. In Seattle, it's very, very easy to go through your entire life in white majority spaces and never put yourself in the reverse situation. I think practice, in those situations will help you understand, how people of color feel in those situations. And so I would, I think there's no substitute for that. And there's also just no substitute for, getting to know people of color as human beings. I was in a anti-racism workshop very recently where, I got sort of congratulated by a person, a white person saying, I'm so sorry those things happened to you, right? Talking about my experiences in Boston and in Maine, where I went to college, right, and this sort of all-white milieu and this racial ignorance. But the problem for me was that it seemed to stop there, and that there was no responsibility acknowledged, that there is, something for white allies to do. That's one reason I'm not a fan of the word ally, because it implies that it's not our struggle, right? That it's not, that you're kind of on the outside looking in, and you're not, right? Racism diminishes everybody, including white people. And so I think it's incredibly important to recognize it as your own struggle and treat it as such, and not separate those things out. So that's just an additional perspective that I'd like to offer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll think more critically also about ally, because I've been going through different, nouns and verbs, so thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you.